Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. And it is time for us to talk some spoilers for Alien Romulus. Yes, this has been quite a week. As of recording this, the film has just started to run some showings tonight. So we are getting a lot more reactions from some folks. Some good friends of ours have seen it and reported back. And it seems like, Luke, everybody seems to be on the same page with us for once about a franchise in the horror space. So that feels pretty good, if I'm not going to lie there.
Yeah, usually when these franchise installments, these legacy installments here, pop off, they're very divisive for a lot of people. Right now, everything seems pretty positive, at least on our side of things. So we'll see over the weekend. I'm curious to see how some people are going to react to the third act, as we'll deep dive into it here in the spoiler discussion. But, that's probably going to be the divisive part of this actual film.
Yeah, I think we're going to get into that a little bit, but I think there's a couple of elements for sure that are going to kind of ruffle some feathers. There have been some pieces that I have already seen rub people the wrong way that I had started to see people talk about online who had gotten to see it at the premiere and who had gotten to see advanced screenings and go to critic screenings. And, I just was like, why on God's green earth are you talking about this right now? Like the movie's not even out. But not everybody is as cool as we would hope they would be when it comes to spoilers. But yeah, man, I have been eager to dive into this, so I kind of wrote out some notes here to kind of keep us on somewhat of a flow, somewhat of a track, because when we talk Alien, we tend to go and theorize and talk forever. So in kind of the spirit of keeping this concise and to the point so we're not just rambling for you guys, we will do our best to keep things going, but also give us just enough room to kind of run with it a little bit. So why don't we dive into things? Obviously, if you've seen our spoiler-free review, or if you haven't, we'll just say it out front. We gave this both a must-see, so this was definitely a huge win for us. We don't have a lot of complaints, but I did want to start off by kind of talking about one of those things that I think could potentially be an issue for people. And I don't think this is going to be the main one, but I could easily see people getting up in arms about it. And that is the opening of this film, because right out of the gate, this thing is kind of changing some implications for, what we can expect from the world of Alien by showing this ship go out to the wreckage of the Nostromo and pull out this crystallized, cacophonized xenomorph corpse. So the alien from the first Alien movie, and they bring it back and they laser it out of the kind of the crystallization. It looked like it was the same material that they build the walls out of and stuff that the aliens tend to use, whatever that black gooey stuff is. But yeah, we watched them kind of dissect that rock and pull out the corpse or whatever the fossilized piece of the original alien was. Luke, what did you think when you first saw that, man? Because I was like, wow, this is a start. This is something wild.
Yeah, I didn't know what was really going on. It was something I didn't expect that sort of opening for this. I didn't know really what going in what we were going to get, because the opening's going to be something that's going to absolutely hook you as to answering questions, opening up questions in the trajectory of the film. But I got to be honest, when I had seen them going through, and I've been diving into, Alien 3 and all of its different scripts and things like that, and you kind of get a little bit of, play in terms of what happened off of Aliens and I guess the ideas of what could have happened that we did not see in terms of, I think there's a face hugger and like encapsulated in amber, I believe, in one of the scripts there. And, I kept getting, Romulus gives me a lot of what could have been with Alien 3. So I kept going back to that. I absolutely loved, them opening up and kind of that nod and saying, what are we going to do here? So, for me, I was not expecting something like that, but I absolutely loved that that's how we open this.
Yeah, and that was again just one of the things I said was that this film has cojones, like it has a
Yes.
sack on it for sure, because there is just, that is such a no, like do not do that, don't go back and mess with the original film in so many people's eyes, in a lot of fans eyes. That is only been done, elements to it have only been done successfully a couple of times. And I would say one of those most recently would be like with Halloween Kills, when they went back and showed the flashback. That was something that I think the horror community, we all kind of got on board and said, wow, that flashback scene was amazing. But even then, it's just a continuation. For them to say that, we're going all the way and showing Wayland Yutani taking the corpse of this xenomorph, and that is how they're going to extract the DNA to later create more xenomorphs as we get into the film. I just thought, wow, that is so smart and so ballsy. And I've seen this. A lot of people are kind of using it as a compliment, but some people might see it as a kind of an insult, but I think it's a compliment, is that people are calling this like the greatest and most expensive fan film ever made. Because I feel like that idea is so something a fan of the franchise would have. They would sit back and consider, where could this story take place? All right, I want it to take place between 1 and 2. Where is my alien going to come from? And if you take kind of the DNA from Prometheus and what they were able to do with that and how they showed what was going on there, and you meld that with the first film, it's like, God, wouldn't it be so cool to see Big Chap again, just for a moment? And I don't know if, I know I'm jumping ahead here, but this also kind of ties into this. I don't know if that alien we see up in the ceiling is Big Chap, if they like resuscitated him somehow, or if that was just another xenomorph that they created. I don't, have yet to see the film a second time. I'm going on Sunday. But I don't know. What was your take on that, Luke? Did you think that was just another xenomorph, or?
You know, it's, at the first take there, and again, I have to watch it. I'm definitely going back to the theater series. I assumed it was, but I don't know if it was meant to be. That
Mhm.
first viewing, I was like, okay, this is a callback. But as I sit with it, I'm still undecided on that. That was my first glance at it, so I am definitely going to go back and rewatch it because, again, when you're watching it, the first one, there was so much hesitation going into that film. I was excited. It was on, my most anticipated, and that high level of anticipation, I feel is like you're so nervous from scene to scene of when are they going to lose it, So going into that was my take on it, but I don't know necessarily if that's 100% what he was going, what Fede Alvarez was saying or not. So for me, I guess it's still up in the air, but I'm leaning toward it was. But again, anything can change really. And you mentioned this an expensive fan film. Touching on those things that are kind of sacred, I think from the original films and how beloved they are. I think there is a certain amount of okay, you can do that. Especially when you're a student of the game, you watch this entire film. Fede Alvarez has an absolute love for the Alien franchise. So by the ending credits for me. I say he can pretty much touch on anything that he wants, because
Yeah.
of how handled with care this thing was. So, for me, whether you say it's an expensive fan film or not, he put so much gravitas into this film and so much care and really put the Alien franchise back on a pedestal. I feel like for him, everything's fair game. If he wants to do a sequel to this thing, I say, I understand you're going to handle it with the best eyes possible. You're coming at it as a fan, but you're also coming at it as a filmmaker, and it's a happy marriage between those.
Mhm.
It's like catching lightning in a bottle, but Fede Alvarez and the Alien franchise, it's a happy marriage.
Absolutely. And speaking of happy marriages and some of the things that you can really tell he put a lot of care and effort, and another thing that I was excited to kind of see more of that really I think sets this film apart, was when we start getting introduced to our characters. And I kind of want to talk about them next, is just all of these characters. Some I would say are better than others, but really I found myself enjoying their presence. I wasn't annoyed by anybody in specific. If anything, the two that I loved and I highlighted in our spoiler free review were Rain and Andy specifically. I mean, like Andy, for me, I always seem to gravitate towards ever since Bishop, the fucking androids in these films. But I thought that Andy was just one of the best. I loved the dynamic that they were able to bring with him, where he starts off as this glitchy kind of messy, borderline, I think, trying to tap into kind of playing him off as maybe a bit on the spectrum when it comes to him being this android who's like not all together. And then as they kind of go through and they give him that upgrade, and seeing him switch and see him become a danger in a sense, like where he's kind of conflicted. I just absolutely adored the performance that David Johnson gave. I thought that he was just one of the absolute highlights. And of course, I said a lot of nice things about Kaylee Spaney, but I think that she absolutely holds her own in this. I loved her in Civil War. But here she's a presence. She actually goes from being this kind of Ripley-esque character of being a little bit unsure, but still is okay with handling herself, to finally getting to that point of having to take charge and kind of move through. And I thought that she was excellent. By the third act, I was completely convinced and on board with her character.
Yeah, in big shoes to fill when you're looking at Sigourney Weaver and going into that, because people are always going to compare, especially when you have a female lead like that. And I love, she has some tones of badassery to her as we meet her, but as the film keeps going, she gets a little more hardened and a little more hardened. I absolutely love her arc of where she's at by the end of it, especially, we're talking Andy and Rain and the relationship those two have. Obviously we're fans of the Alien franchise. Bishop has a special place in my heart,
Absolutely.
Just absolutely great. But the
He's the
performance,
best android in the entire series.
and
So.
and looking at David Johnson's portrayal of Andy, my gosh, what I was not expecting, the emotional level, the chapters that we get with this character being a droid. Starting off, like you said, a little glitchy, feels like he is on the spectrum. I love that presentation that he has, where it's like he's like decommissioned. He's one of the older models. Rain's dad had him and kind of reprogrammed him. I love those elements to him, especially when Rain leaves him outside and those kids start messing with him, and then they kick his ass, and she comes back and he's got the droid blood, and you're like, she fixes him. I absolutely love that dynamic of her taking care of him and him telling these nonsensical dad jokes that just
so
have
good,
so much
dude.
levity
So
to them,
good.
and it works so well. It adds to the moments, especially as we get further through the film, and there are moments of their heaviness, and then he tells a joke, and it works. Sometimes that can come off as cheesy, but his delivery for this absolutely works, and it's something that's fun, makes sense for a droid, to when we're first introduced to them and they're sitting down eating, and I can't remember which joke it was, but he said he used to love that. Oh, seafood. I'm on a seafood diet. I see food and I eat it. And
Eat
she
it.
says, I love that when I was 7, and I just love that dynamic. She's growing as a person. He's kind of still stuck a little bit, but then when all hell breaks loose and he kind of gets that upgrade from Wayland Yutani and his new directive, and you kind of again get these different performances from David Johnson, which is just unexpected from a droid level. I was not really expecting that. I figured he was going to be more so one note, which I was loving where he was at the very beginning. But as soon as he gets a little more serious, has a new directive, I just absolutely love it. And then we kind of, revert back to that relationship that Rain and Andy had. And I love those levels to it, where it's like we're on this thrill ride. We don't know what we're going to get or where Andy's going to be toward the end of this. Again, Betty Alvarez had absolute care when we were looking at these characters, developing these characters, and putting them on screen, because, I haven't had that emotional arc with a droid ever. I love Bishop, but this one, David Johnson's portrayal with Andy is just something that needs to be studied for future Alien franchise films.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that, again, I was kind of expecting him to be a droid from the trailers, and I only say that just because of his delivery. I don't know if he has many lines in the trailer. I think the only one he gets is "run," but the way that he enunciated it and said it, I was just like, I think he could be an android, and just the way he kind of carried himself. But they did a great job of hiding that throughout the trailers, so that way it was kind of a nice surprise. Like he said, when he starts bleeding the milky blood and stuff, and it was just like, yeah, I knew it. I knew that he was going to be a droid. But it's like either way, I was just so on board with his character. I love the backstory they gave to him too, of it being Rain's dad, who again he was decommissioned and put him together. And I love that there's a reason for him, being so important and integral to their mission, because he is a Wayland Yutani decommissioned droid, and the station, the Romulus and Remus, is Wayland Yutani tech. So they needed him to access the ship, and how he can speak mother, which I thought was super cool. Again, you can just tell that this is a film made by an Aliens fan. Like they really weren't leaving anything on the table. They had an answer for everything that they introduce. Speaking of which, I wanted to kind of get into the setting of this one, because we kind of learn a little bit about the Romulus and Remus station, and just kind of what the deal is with that, and how it was kind of this floating lab that's turned into this basically haunted house as these kids get into it. And I know some people have said, like, you could see a lot of different elements from Fede Alvarez's other films in this one. And all I can think about when I hear that now is I think about how, you have the kids from Don't Breathe going into this dark, desolate house that's all quiet and stuff. And you get the same kind of energy from this. But it's like, again, I think it just plays into the horror elements here. And I really found myself really loving how much they use the space in this, because this to me felt like, they use the space in Alien pretty well. I mean, the ship in Alien, there's a lot of iconic moments, but for the most part, it's a couple of hallways, and it's kind of those main areas that our characters hang out in. It's really, for me, Aliens is when you get kind of that expansive colony, like, we're going through many different sections of this place, and I felt very much like the set here, the setting was very Aliens influenced.
Yeah, and it was really, again, going into a film like this being so anticipated, you're always worried and wondering when are they going to fumble it, and as we start getting into callbacks, I guess, in seeing the familiar setting that we've seen, for me, I started getting real hesitant of, is this just going to be so much ceremony that it's going to be so eye rolling? We're going to have so many callbacks, and we're just going to be bombarded here, and it's just going to start turning into, the greatest hits. But I got to say, they really took a setting that we've seen before and made it feel unique, made it feel different. I love the callback of the acid drip,
Hmm.
and creating all those holes. I thought that was so smart, especially it is used later on in creating a very unique and fun scene, I think. So, I was so hesitant at first, but then got extremely excited as I figured out how well they were using this space. When, they go back into the lab and all the lights go on. It's like, oh, I was in it right there. And, you mentioned Don't Breathe. One of my favorite sequences in this is, I gave me deep Don't Breathe vibes of when they're in the basement and you cannot see anything. And for that tension that we have in that basement scene, was reminiscent when we get into the face huggers underwater.
Hmm.
And like when they start dropping, and Andy is like rebooting, and basically it's all
So good.
happening in front of him, but he's rebooting, so he can't see in it, and all the human characters are just like off doing their own thing, and you just hear bump 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 as they're all just dropping into the water, and then you're seeing them all go skimmer under the water, and as the human characters are figuring it out, like they're wondering what's going on. That scene for me was so tense. I gotta say, at that point, I was absolutely all in. That's when I threw all my chips in the middle of the table and said, okay, take me on this ride, Fede Alvarez. I trust you completely, because that scene, I still get chills thinking about it. I think it was just so well done. The usage of the red, the little opening in the door when everyone, they're coming through and they're trying to help them. And then, of course, when Andy is rebooting, I think all that stuff, just the chemistry that he created in that scene is something that's going to stand out. Probably one of the best scenes of the year for me.
100%. I adored that scene. What a way to get all the, stuff started. I mean, like, we have that kind of haunted house feel as they're kind of getting into this desolate, abandoned ship. But then, to have it kind of the tension build right there. Because as the audience, unless you're a newcomer to the Alien franchise, you are so aware of the danger that these characters are in from the moment they get into that ship, and just they have no clue. And that scene is just pure tension, because as the ship is booting up and the alien eggs are thawing and they're starting to fall out, or the face huggers are starting to fall out. Now, one thing we touched on that I was real excited to get into, and it was actually my next piece, so this is a perfect kind of segue into the scene, Luke, but the face huggers are so much more of a threat in this film than I think they've ever been in any of these movies. The only one I would say even comes close is maybe Aliens, when it's stuck in the room with
Yes.
Newt and Sigourney. It's like, I don't think in any other film like they're really all that threatening. Like, yeah, of course you don't want them. We all know what they are. They're terrible, but they're all just quick. It's like they've never been used like they were used in this movie. Before we get onto the scene of the hallway where they have to kind of walk through all those face huggers and they turn up their body heat, and we actually learn a little bit more about how they operate, which again, fantastic. One element, since you pretty much described that scene in its entire opening there, I agree with you on it, but there's a moment in that I loved, which was when those face huggers, the one crawls up Andy and jumps off of him to try to get to, I believe that one was trying to get Tyler? I think it
can't
was.
remember offhand of, it gets all mixed up because they're so in there. But I know the scene you're referring, like that element of him, just like you can see the little appendages,
Mhm.
crawling up Andy and then jumping off. That again, the facehuggers felt like a threat in this. They've been so kind of one note where it's like a means to an end of, we have to have the facehugger to get to the xenomorph. They felt like their own final boss in a sense, where it was
Mhm.
like, these are just as big a threat as the xenomorphs, if not maybe even more, because they're smaller. They can jump out at you out of nowhere, and I absolutely love that element to it. I think it was so smart to really use them, like you mentioned, Aliens, where it's just that one scene. It's a very tense scene, but they don't really capitalize on it after that. Betty Alvarez had a handful of great scenes with the facehuggers here that are just oddly enough gave me some vibes of, you're going to talk about the hallway scene. A little bit later down the line with the xenomorphs, we get another great scene with the acid blood,
Mhm.
but them walking through a hallway there. Oddly enough, this gave me some vibes from Infested that we've seen a
Yeah,
couple months
no,
ago.
definitely.
I thought that was great, and of course, the one scene you're going to talk about with the body heat. We got to bring up Tremors 2 with the great Fred Ward. I mean, come on, it all just works. It all melts together.
Yeah, no, I definitely, there's a lot of love on screen for other horror films in this, you cannot deny. But I think that the thing that I adored about this movie, all in all, when it came to these face huggers again, was not only were they using them and actually making them a threat, they were throughout the entire film. So, they start off obviously, but even when the xenomorphs are there in the third act, like in that scene, the acid scene, which we'll of course dive into really deeply here in a minute, but they are still attacking. They're still face huggers jumping off the wall with the Xenos, and it's like you never see that. We've only ever seen that, I think, in like extended media and like comic books and things, where it's like they're always just a means to an end. Like you said, you see the face huggers, then they're gone. It's like I've never seen face huggers and xenomorphs fight side by side, which is just like, that's crazy. Why have we never seen that before? And it's like, again, why I think this movie is actually moving this franchise forward a bit. And I the hallway scene in itself, introducing the lore of just having the face huggers use body heat. Maybe it was said at one point or another. I don't remember that
I don't
being a thing.
recall it, to be honest. I thought that was for me that was a new kind of lore.
Mm-hmm.
At least I didn't see it in the movies and have never come across it. But I've only read some of the comics, so I don't know if that is an established lore with the comics. But I thought absolutely so well done to really build that tense moment again with the facehuggers.
Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so smart. I do love how they have to kind of get to that point where it's like they're running from them, and it almost feels like pointless to an extent. You really think that Tyler's going to get it at that point, but obviously Andy closes the door, and you think he's closing it on him. And they had that great callback from when they were talking to, I think it was Bjork or whatever his name was, but the other kid, where he was talking about how his mom died because a synthetic shut the door, and Andy's like, oh no, I timed it just right, so that way you guys would have enough time to get through. And they're all kind of sitting there like, I don't know about that, bro, like that was pretty fucking close. Like
He's got that one line again. I have to revisit, but he's like, I almost did, but I didn't. It's like
yeah.
it was such a great like asshole line for especially where we're seeing what Andy was at the
Mm-hmm.
start and what he's becoming at that point.
And I know we'll kind of jump ahead on a couple of things here. I want to save the one big element that I think is going to cause people issues for a second. I know we kind of passed over it. I just want to kind of stay in with the alien stuff and then the acid stuff for now. But one thing that I wrote down here is since we're talking about stuff that we haven't seen before with like face huggers and things, I want to talk about the wall vagina. Like, oh my god, how have we never seen this? Like, how have we never seen the basically the evolution from chest burster to alien and how that works? And that was so cool to me to see that that element of it. And it's again, it's something that you think after this would be, if we're not counting the AVP films, what, 7 movies into this franchise,
Yeah.
and we haven't even seen how a face hugger grows up. I always just assume that they just rapidly got bigger, but we see that they shed their skin like a snake, and then obviously go into this kind of cocoon that looks like a vagina on a wall.
Yeah, it was certainly interesting from that standpoint. I didn't know where they were going with it again because I hadn't seen that visually before, but we have that kind of established lore of like egg morphing and things like that. So I wasn't really sure if that's what they were going to go with. But
I did think they were going to bring that back at one point. We'll have to touch on that after this.
And I thought they were as well. And again, like I said, I've been revisiting a lot of the Alien 3 scripts, and there's an audio book out there, or audio drama of a second script from, I think, William Gibson out there. And Bishop in that script mentions, I think he calls it reproductive flexibility or something like that. And I was curious to see where they were going to go, if they were establishing a new set of lore here, just because it was something that was a little jarring, and I didn't really know exactly what was going on. But I love what that does lead to in terms of a kill. I thought, that acid just dripping all over our one character, I thought was so well done. But, when we get into the kind of unsettling version of that, I thought that was rather interesting, especially sitting through something like Men from last year.
Yeah.
That was like, oh, where are we going here? It's a little dicey, but I love the imagery that they were going with there. Again, they don't harp on it too long where it's like, oh, this is some sort of art house thing. I love that they're kind of connecting all those dots, and also drawing parallels for human reproductiveness and xenomorph reproductiveness, I guess.
Yeah, and I thought that visually it was eerie and interesting. And again, I'm just more fascinated because it's a piece that we had never seen before. It seems like Fede Alvarez set out to answer a lot of burning questions that maybe Alien fans had, and maybe some we didn't realize that we had. But I thought that was rather interesting. I enjoyed seeing our character kind of jam that electric pole in there and thinking that he killed it. Obviously, like you said, getting the acid on him. But when he got stabbed with the tail and you saw the alien kind of finally birth itself, it was like, oof, really, really scary shit. And I love that alien is all practical in that scene. I love that you could tell it's practical, but it doesn't look bad at all. It looks fantastic and intimidating.
and we'll probably jump into it, but I just want to bring it up because you mentioned it. I loved like the abruptness of some of these kills. Like I was not
Mhm.
expecting some of them to be happening at the time that they happened, but I love that Betty Alvarez kind of kept us on our toes with like, hey, everyone's on the table here. We don't know when everyone's going to die. You're not looking for your happy ending. At one point, I just threw that out the window. It's like, I guess everyone's dying
Mhm.
by the time we walk out of this thing. So I loved kind of the abruptness that he did bring to those kills, just because sometimes there is a little too much ceremony. There's a little too much buildup. But, with him, he kept them abrupt when they needed to be abrupt. And then, like when you look at Tyler's death, I was like, oh, I was not expecting that to happen at that point in time. So I
Yeah.
love the timing of these kills and just how sporadic they became. And just, I could not call them throughout this entire film.
Yeah, and for the sake of time, I will push us through a little bit more here, just so we can get up to that scene. I know we're going to spend a lot of time on that acid scene, but right before that, you had Tyler's sister, who I know the actress. It was Kay. Her character gets taken by the xenomorph, presumably killed. But we get into that hallway, and obviously they have their guns at that point, and it's Andy, Tyler, and we had just gotten a big revelation, which again I'll save, but we're going through that hallway and we find Kay again, and this is where I thought they were going to reincorporate the that what you were referencing there
Egg
from the
morphing.
first Alien, the egg morphing, which I thought that would have been amazing, because I've always thought that was a really cool idea. And I like the idea of xenomorphs kind of, because the way it works with like them needing to kind of wait, or at least have a queen birthed or a queen facehugger brought forth, like it needs to be made or at least brought into the world. I've always loved the idea of them, being able to somewhat be self-sustaining if they need to. It's maybe a slower process for them without a queen, but they need to do the egg morphing thing. And I always thought that was such a smart idea from the original Alien that they never brought into it again. But I thought they were going to go with that. They unfortunately did not. Nonetheless, I think that it is still a cool idea that they should go back to at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's worth it to really expand upon that. And again, I'm going to keep bringing it up just because I've been diving the world of Alien 3 and all those scripts, and Bishop saying reproductive flexibility. I think it's in that audio drama. He does mention in that. And I guess, I don't know if it's canon, not, I get all mixed up in terms of what I've read and everything. But, he talks about every xenomorph having the ability to be a queen. It just depends on more so their surroundings of how many viable people do they have that they can become a queen in terms of that reproductive flexibility. So, I love that kind of, this ultimate killing machine. It's self-sustaining. It can do its own thing. Life finds a way. Am I right? Where,
I
it's one of those things where, they can pretty much do anything. It's if there's no queen, hey, they're going to survive. They're going to thrive. Facehuggers are going to be created. Xenomorphs are going to be created. And it is just this ultimate killing machine. There's no way around it. So I absolutely love that aspect of it, because just because, there's a vacancy for a queen doesn't mean that the xenomorphs are null and void. They're still going to find a way. There is that reproductive flexibility. And I love seeing it here.
absolutely. I think that it's something that I feel like with all the swings they took, Fede didn't want to, I guess, maybe cement that in there, but it is something that I could easily see working again. Like you said, this reproductive flexibility of these creatures, again, when you're talking about the perfect organism, it makes sense for that to, be a thing. And like you said, life finds a way. I have strangely found myself, because I've just been listening to nothing but alien lore all this week. So I was so excited for Monday with our screening that like I was listening to stuff all day at work, and then all this week I've just been following up on like videos going over comics and other like drafts of scripts and things. So I've gotten a lot stuck in my brain recently about it. But
Hi, I'm John Carpenter, and you will see me in the Thing expanded documentary.
It could have imitated 1 million life forms on 1 million planets.
There was one of those things out there trying to imitate him, Gary. We gotta burn the rest of them.
Nobody trusts anybody now.
So how do we know who's human?
He ain't tying me up.
This thing wants to hide inside an imitation. We're not getting out of here alive. But neither's that thing.
Yeah, I think we can talk about it now. We're right up there. We can kind of discuss this, and then we'll circle back to a couple things. Yes, as we get to the climax of this, Tyler, he gets taken. He's dead. And Andy,
What a gruesome scene. Sorry.
right? Oh my God, yeah. Like, and you know, we see it in damn near every Alien film, but having the tongue come out and bust his eye, I don't know. There's something something a little bit
So
more
visceral. That
little
close-up
bit-
scene of it.
a little
and
bit
again,
rougher, yeah.
it was abrupt. I was not expecting his death to happen at that point in time. I thought if he was going to die, this was, those particular beats. Oh, he's going to get out of this one just by some chance, and then maybe we'll circle back and he'll die. But, for me, at that point in time, I'll be honest, I was not expecting his death to happen at that moment.
Maybe not at that moment. I knew it was coming, though, just because it's like, yeah, as all these films go, I think only Hicks has ever survived that long. When it comes down to kind of like the final group there. I know there's a few more in Alien Resurrection who do, but I think that ending is kind of weird in general. But we're going to talk about this acid scene. I mean, this was kind of like probably my favorite set piece in the film. I want to say, I think like as far as action, creativity, and just overall like had me sitting there going, oh my God, like tenseness. Like there's tense scenes throughout this entire film, don't get me wrong, but like this was like a whole nother level. I described it in our spoiler-free review as Fede Alvarez being that kid who's just playing with his action figures. He's got his soldiers, colonial marines, and his alien figures, and he's just thinking about it, and he's just thinking what would be a really cool action scene. Well, we're in space, take the gravity off, and then you have all of this fucking acid blood all around them, and it's just getting closer to them, and it's just like, oh my God. And then you have the whole that it's a gravity purge, so it's like, it's gonna drop at some point. It's like, oh Jesus, what a tense, awesome sequence.
And as we got into that film and we have this moment, where we have gravity, we don't have gravity, it's like, okay, this is easily going to come back into play, but I had no idea, how it was going to. And I love the idea, really making use of no gravity, because we don't really see that often in the Alien franchise. Nothing sticks out in my brain as we're speaking about it right now, and maybe it has been touched on, but not to the extent that we get in Alien Romulus here. And I loved, not being able to call what exactly was going to be happening. And then we were in that scene. And again, we call back to Andy's dad jokes of, talking about a book about gravity, and I couldn't put it down, and that's the trigger of like, oh, let's turn off the gravity. And as soon as we got into that scene, in those stakes of having a gun, you can't use a gun. It seemed like sometimes when we got later on into the Alien films, it was just kind of, in that first one, it's bleeding, it bleeds through level, and then they got to stop it. And, they brought back those stakes to it of, you can't use the gun because the acid's gonna bleed through and, create a hole in the ship. So, you're kind of just sitting there with a gun that you can't use. And then as soon as we get into that no gravity and the acid's just floating around and they're blowing away the xenomorphs, oh, what a great element it is. It's like, because that's a threat. We're taking the threat out, but then there's a new threat. And it's like, how you trying to zigzag your way out of this maze of just floating acid blood is just absolutely tremendous. And her and Rain using the gun to kind of push herself away from it.
That was so good. That was so good. I loved that. It was so cool. I thought that was such a fun piece to that.
Talk about, again, there's so many great scenes in this film, but such a well thought out scene of like when we talk about films of, that could not be done in the 80s, this is the scene that you could not achieve. This is why one of the reasons Alien Romulus should exist is because of that scene right there. You would never get that in any prior Alien franchise films. That tech did not exist, and Prometheus and Covenant are different films in terms of what we had gotten from those original 4. So I absolutely love that. That was like this is why this film exists for me. This could not have been achieved otherwise, and that's the scene. Again, I'm gonna go back and I'm talk about that as we're wrapping up the best of the year.
Oh yeah, and it's the money shot of the movie for me, honestly. Like that whole sequence was just so unexpected, so cool. You're sitting there thinking, how the hell are they going to get out of this? And it's like, I can't even consider what they're going to do. And then once all the dots connect, it's like, oh my god, what is this going to? Yeah, and I kind of love the idea too, because it's a double-edged sword there, where once that gravity purge hits and the gravity comes on, it's like you almost have a
stake,
a third level of damage, because it's like once all the acid falls, that's so much that it's going to burn through the ship, and it does, and it creates a giant hole, and it's insane. And it does lead us to the final moment of them kind of going up the elevator shaft and trying to get out there. I do, since I know that's a sticking point for you when it comes to kind of ceremony, I think we can kind of talk into some of our complaints and some of the moments that I think are going to be pretty controversial. But to start that off, I want to take us all the way back to meeting our other synthetic, which is Rook, who, as we all know, if you are an Alien fan, if you know anything about this franchise, is played, or at least as it's listed on IMDb here, facial and vocal referenced by Ian Holm. And I love it. I love the idea. I love it. Makes sense because we're not that far from the first film. We're only about, what did they say, 10 years, 20 years past Alien. I think it's 10 years past Alien. So it would make sense that there would be another synthetic of his design available, especially with Weyland-Yutani. The CGI doesn't necessarily work, but you get used to it. I think I at least by the time he was on the little screens by the end of the movie, didn't bother me as much. But I'll tell you, those first few minutes of him talking to them face to face, it looked really rough. And I have to be completely honest there when I say that, like it looked, and we saw this in IMAX, probably the best setting you could sit down to see this movie for the first time, and it was looking a little rough there for me.
And it definitely looked rough. I was having a hard time adjusting to it because I wasn't sure if we were trying to say, like, I was trying to reconcile with it in my brain as I was like, is he supposed to be looking this jarring to me? Like, is he I understand he's a synthetic older model. He's been through some stuff, clearly. Is he supposed to be looking this jarring, or is the CGI just this bad? Because it, like you said, once he's on the screens, and I think maybe that was a means to an end, because once he's on the screens, it's not as offensive, I don't think. You can kind of just pass by it and it's okay. And I actually like that idea of it, where it's like he's kind of this overseer, facilitator, directing Andy to do these things from his little nest, and I like that aspect of it. I like that the dynamic that they present there. And when he's like setting up, I think maybe I've reconciled it a little more in my head to say, okay, maybe he's a little messed up. So yeah, but like when there's like these real close-ups of his face,
those are when it looks the worst.
And I was like, I don't think we needed these. So because there are scenes in there where when they set him up, as they get him functioning again, and he's like concealed by the darkness a little bit, and it's like, okay, this works. But then they start zeroing in on his face, and I'm like, I don't know if this is the best choice. I don't know if this is we really need to be focusing on right now.
There were parts where it almost looked like his deep faked kind of the de-aged face wasn't attached to the body.
Yeah.
That it was like it almost looked like a Snapchat filter at times. And I was like, what the fuck is this? But again, it's like, I love the idea. I like the idea of having another version of Ash, having like obviously they establish he is a different synthetic. His name's Rook, and he is working for the company. It makes total sense. And again, I just think that that's the element that it works in a script, it works for the story, but I don't care for the execution. And there's two things that I want to say about this. One, Disney, I'm talking to you specifically because I know you fronted the money for this. You can hide behind the 20th Century Studios banner all you want. We all know this is you guys. Please stop trying to fetishize the de-aging of actors. It's not working. I don't know why you guys keep trying to do it. You've been doing this since Rogue One. It's always creates this conversation. Always. There's this, why does this look so strange? It's like, why couldn't you just do Alien 3's idea? Like, how they had Bishop, and Bishop looked like shit, kind of, in Alien 3, and that they were like, wow, this looks terrible, this whole thing, like, because they couldn't get, they couldn't have, oh my god, why am I forgetting his name? Bishop's Lance Henriksen, yeah, he wasn't available to do those scenes that at that point, so he could only do the ending sequences, but it's like, he's all jacked up. And this one's all jacked up. Why couldn't you just do a puppet and literally do the same thing?
Yeah.
Like, why it would have worked if you just would have fucked up his face more.
Exactly. Like, if you would have just, like, half face off, especially that coming through the screen as we see it later on, I think would have worked in terms of a tension aspect. Just a pure terror and horror aspect. I think that would have worked so well, because when we're first introduced to him, he's laying face down. And, I love that scene where he pops up like he's awake, and I was like, oh, what are we in for here? And it's like, you had the perfect excuse to just mess this dude up and have him have half a face and missing an eye and stuff like that. But instead we zeroed in on his face, which conceptually, as you're writing it, it's like, okay, this could be interesting, but then visually you just lose something there. It just wasn't handled properly.
Yeah. And I think it just comes down to a little bit too much confidence in that technology. I think that it's something that this studio seems to really want to work, but it always has the same effect. Now, moving into the next piece that is probably going to be pretty controversial, but I have to admit, I have not seen anybody complain about this yet. And I've seen a lot more people compliment it, surprisingly, rather than complain. And granted, like we said, as of recording this, we're mere hours into the first, like, maybe 3 or 4 screenings in the United States around the world. And it is the callback, the tie back to the Prometheus project. I was freaking the fuck out when they name dropped the Prometheus project, and Rook is on screen explaining how him and this team of scientists on the Romulus and Remus, their job was to extract the lifeblood of these creatures and kind of get down to the most basic DNA, like molecular structure of them, and literally extract the black goo to try to synthesize it and make it an upgrade for humanity. And it's just like, oh my god, Fede Alvarez has done it. He is literally he's closed the loop. There's been this open loop in my mind, and I know a lot of other people's minds. It's like, yes, I love Prometheus. Wasn't a huge fan of Covenant, but it's always felt like that's going to be now an empty space of time between that and the original films. Romulus has just closed that loop. And I could have stood up and clapped at that point. I loved this incorporation.
Yeah, I think, I was not expecting it. I was so happy.
Neither was I. Like,
that was a scene that had me, we're sitting in these loungy seats at the theater.
I saw you.
Seats, and that was a scene that had me sit up.
I saw you sit up. You went like, shit. Like, you're so into it. I was like,
it caught my attention. I was so excited to see it. And again, I keep mentioning Alien 3, where this human intervention, this aspect of it, and you look at what this black goo started out as with the engineers and Prometheus, and what the achievement was going to be there, and then for humans to try and take the black goo and synthesize it and have a different purpose for it, even though that's not what it's meant for. You have human intervention here, and of course we see this rat and what they did to it, and how it became whole again. But then a little while later, we see the real effects that it has. And
Oh, yeah.
as soon as that lore got established for me, I was so excited, because I was like, the possibilities, the body horror, what we can get down the line here for this, and just establishing this new chapter. It's just absolutely exciting. And of course, we do see we see a big portion of what happens, a product here of this idea. And again, I love this aspect. I love the establishing this new chapter. And I really hope that we see this come back around and we do something more with it, because we did a whole video on Prometheus and why we love Prometheus.
Yeah.
This Alien Romulus just emphasizes my love for Prometheus now.
It feels so serendipitous that we did this video, and literally, when did we shoot that? We shot it, and then like the next day we shot it on Sunday night.
Yep.
And the next day we went and saw it, and it was like we had just gushed about Prometheus for like 30 minutes and how much we loved the concept of the black goo, and how it's one of those things where it's just like it opens up the door to all of these, horrific body horror engineer. Like we could literally have anything come out of a human being with that, like in any form. And it just takes this concept of the alien and what it originally was and just blows the doors off of it. And I'm so happy that Fede Alvarez saw that. And again, this is why I think I love this movie so much, because it's so easy for people to go forward with this. And, a lot of people saying that Prometheus was a misstep. They didn't like it. A lot of people were very vocal about not liking Prometheus. And the fact that Fede Alvarez said, no, Prometheus is still canon. We're going to use elements from Prometheus because it matters and it's a piece of this world. We're even going to go as far as to name drop the project and establish that, yes, Peter Whalen died while on this mission. Like, that's been his life's work. That is just, to me, the most validating thing ever. And I could easily see why Ridley Scott was so, because like I was, you always hear that. You hear about it with James Cameron a lot too, with all these Terminator movies. So he's like, oh, it's great. I love the new Terminator movies. They're so awesome. So I don't put much stake into it, but going back and like after seeing the film and hearing what Ridley Scott had to say about Romulus, you can clearly tell that he was like, I love this movie. He's like, I love it. I love it. And it's because he's actually like paying it forward. He's actually moving this story forward and not just leaving shit in the dust. He's saying everything in this matters, the good and the bad.
And we've talked about it. We certainly mentioned it here, probably in our discussions of Halloween. I always feel like incorporating every prior installment in your new installment, there's a level of creativity that has to be, a nod to. You have to really nod to it, because you're not disregarding things. You're not retconning things like the Halloween franchise did and say, we're going to start fresh. Ignore everything ignore decades of films and creativity, and we're starting new. That doesn't matter anymore. And I absolutely love that Fede Alvarez incorporated Prometheus and said, no, everything. Let's bring everything in. Let's make it all work, because we can. This is such an expansive universe, an expansive lore. We don't have to zero in and just say, no, only 1 and 2 are canon. Let's bring everything in and figure it out. And you can tell he's got a love for the franchise. I got excited when I saw Prometheus there. It opens up so many different possibilities, and really, what this franchise should be, because looking at the product that we got at the end of this film, with that black goo and what it does to human beings and what it can produce. I mean, you could tell an alien film without a xenomorph in it now, really.
Yeah.
If you look at it.
In this film, like, that's what Prometheus was trying to say. Prometheus was like, we're going to tell a story about the space jockey, the engineers, and show you that, yes, there are other threats in this universe. And everybody got pissed because there was no xenomorph in it. And Fede Alvarez was like, no, we can do this. We can do both. I know they tried to do this with Covenant, but I think Covenant, we'll have to save for another video, but that just felt like too much of a, we're trying to please everybody and we're mixing things that don't matter. This is what felt natural. This felt like, yes, we're going to have our Prometheus creatures and we're going to have our traditional xenomorphs and we're going to show you how it all works. Love it. Absolutely appreciate it. I sit at the throne and the altar of Fede Alvarez for this. I mean, again, this is the balls that I say that this movie has right here. This and the opening of just taking big swings and taking them so confidently that they pay off. This is not some Halloween Ends bullshit where we're just taking big swings for nothing. We're taking big swings because they count, and we're going to show you how they count.
Fede Alvarez is like that Eric Andre skit where he is saying he didn't get the job at Fruit Loops, and then he's saying, "Eat from me." That's us.
Yeah, I'm ready. I will eat from you. But let's move into the final piece to this, because we're already getting close to an hour on this. I told you guys in the spoiler pre-review this was going to be long, but so after we establish the Prometheus, connection, and we have this synthesized kind of dosage, these shots, these little EpiPen type things with the black goo that they've kind of reworked. And, they're going to give it to Kay at one point because she's injured. She's been stabbed by the xenomorph.
She's dying.
She's also pregnant, which is something we did not mention. But she ends up getting put on the elevator to go ahead, get onto their ship, while Tyler and Rain go back to get Andy. And what ends up happening is Tyler dead by that point? Tyler's dead. Tyler's
dead. Yep.
So she because Andy gets knocked down. Sorry. Only seen the movie once, guys. So they end up, she puts her on the elevator shaft. She goes up to the ship. She is not doing well. Kay is literally on death's door. She ends up breaking down and taking one of these shots and just going off of the knowledge of what she saw the rat, recover from. Well, what we saw was, if you go over in the lab, just off in the corner, they show a shot of it, is that rat turned into some kind of xenomorph looking monster and died in the cage. So, that just goes to show you, and we know the black goo, this thing's not going to go well. End of the movie happens. If you want to talk briefly about that very ceremonious kind of elevator scene, they use the famous "get away from her, you bitch" line. Honestly, that was another thing that I just felt like that was forced. That almost felt mandated. I know it was like a nice tongue-in-cheek nod, but there were a couple of lines in this where they're just repeating lines from older movies. And every time they did it, I was just like, it's cute, but let's not do that anymore. You're doing so well. I don't need this.
Yeah, it seemed like the elevator scene, again, idea-wise, conceptually sounds great on paper, but then the way you pull it off, a little CGI heavy, like you said, that a lot of winks and nods, and it's just some ceremony that I think I could have done without, because, if you really would have just built up that tension a little more, they wanted the scene with the xenomorph phasing off with Rain. Of course, we've seen it a lot and a lot of the promotional stuff. I understand why they did it. It just didn't. It felt out of place for me, especially when we had already established the stakes and what the xenomorph is out to achieve, and then just kind of just staring face to face and not really. What we saw happen with Tyler, and then this just kind of being a face to face off, didn't really make sense for me. So for me, it was a little more eye rolling, especially at that juncture in the film. I was like, this stuff should have, if we were going to do this stuff, I think it should have happened earlier on, not as we've already built this up so much. And, get away from her, bitch, for me, delivery is completely different, and it was meant to be. It just, it just felt like we have to shoehorn this in here. It didn't really feel natural at all.
Yeah, it feels like the superhero moment, where Deadpool is always like, "Oh, he's gonna do the superhero landing." Like, we all know it's coming. We all know it's gonna be that moment that's supposed to wow us and make you stand up and cheer. But it's like, no, it's just okay. Yeah, he did it. We get it. It's the Family Guy. Oh, they said it. They said the name. Kind of bit. And I'm fine with it. I live with it. It won't ruin the movie for me, but it is eye rolly, and it
Yeah,
is one of
there's
those
so
things where
much
it's
good
like,
in here that you find a couple strikes, it's not going to hurt the film at all. It's just kind of you got to get through it to get to the really good stuff.
yeah, and all in all, um, we get to the point where they're all back on their ship. They get away from the Romulus ship. It crashes. They shut it down, and they have the black goo containers with them, and everybody's gearing up. They got their cryopods, the whole reason they were getting on the ship in the first place, which we never discussed. But, if you've seen the movie, hopefully, if you're here with us, that was the point. And they put Kay in the cryopod first. She hooks up Andy to the computer. We have that heartwarming moment where she's basically like, this is going to keep you awake, or at least charged or whatever, until we get to the planet we're getting to, which we also need to say, apparently that planet, they don't do synths. They say, fuck you, get out of here. No robots allowed. But Rain's like, I don't give a damn. Like, you're coming with us regardless. We ride or die for this. And yeah, everything's great. It's all good. We did it. Cool. Let's go to bed.
Let's roll those credits.
Nope. Nope. Kay's pod starts blinking red, and suddenly we know, something's gonna happen here. And what do you know? We get the infamous, or I guess no, not infamous, but famous Alien fourth act, where yes, Kay starts giving birth. And what does she give birth to, Luke? Well, it's an egg that starts splitting open and dropping acid everywhere. Rain tries to get rid of it, drops it into the cargo hold of their ship, into like this sandy, whatever the hell, salt or whatever it is. And we just watch this horrific little baby face come out of it and start crying. And she goes back to try to go get the cryo, instead of a flamethrower, they were using that cryo tube, flamethrower thing, to freeze it. But by the time she gets back there, egg's empty, brother. It's just a bunch of acid, and it
already went through puberty.
Yep, we get Alien Romulus's rendition of The Newborn, which they are dubbing on IMDb here as The Offspring. And yeah, again, I appreciate this. This is a little bit of that reincorporation, saying we're taking everything. And yeah, it's a little bit of that Alien Resurrection love thrown there, but a bit different, very Black Goo inspired. And man, this is quite a sequence. And I couldn't help but think about Evil Dead 2013 with this, because you have the Abomination in that film, and that's a new addition to the Evil Dead franchise at that point. And now we have The Offspring. Luke, how did you feel about all this once we got into this final sequence?
Listen, when we saw the baby at first, in baby form, I was like, I don't know how I feel about it. But then as Rain went down there trying to kill off the baby, and we saw this, this footsteps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I was like, oh, what the hell is this thing gonna look like? And then we see it like in this little tunnel, and it's just a big, just gangly kind of slim thing. And I was like, hell yes, I am 100% in on this right now. You could just see the silhouette of this thing, and to be honest, if we would have wrote in the sunset all of them in their cryopods and be like, hey, Alien Romulus Part 2 is going to come out at some point. We're going to see what this is going to look like. Okay. I think Fede Alvarez did a great job. Pay tribute to a lot of stuff. Really establish some lore, progress the lore. I would have been happy with it. But, to get this bonus round that really felt like his stamp. This was his stamp on this film, in establishing something new and different. I was so excited. This was, I've talked about it on the channel, my Malignant moment of this is like something completely off the wall. I love it. I felt like, people might not like this because we're getting something new, but when you're doing something like this, you got to give us something new. You gotta open up a new chapter in this and put your stamp on it. And that's what Fede Alvarez did. is when I look back at Romulus, there's so many great scenes. I'm always going to remember that ending sequence just because it's something new, it's something different. It incorporates some lore, and he just told a really fun little story there. Really tense, a lot of horror. I was all in.
Absolutely. And I said, to you, my only real complaints, if I had to have one about that, was and I understand it now. I had my come to Jesus moment while we were still sitting there in the theater. We were talking to one of our critic friends for a moment there about it, and he was also not crazy about it, but like you had kind of reminded me as we were sitting there, it's like, well, no, it's also harkening back to the Prometheus, the engineers. And I agree. I think I would have wanted the face to be a bit more monsterish, but the fact that it was clearly trying to reference the engineers in the sense there, it's kind of that amalgamation of human and engineer in the face. I can accept it. I'm fine with it. Because the rest of this thing is just fucking disturbing. Like, it's got the alien tail. It's got those little back spike kind of tube things that are not fully developed, and it just looks disgusting. And its little protruding mouth is more like a snake in a sense. It's like, it is just clearly it's like the amalgamation of all of the horrors that were on the Romulus and Remus that are now just in this one being. And now Rain has to fight it. And does it end the way you think it's going to end? Yes, it gets blasted out into space, just like every other Alien movie. But you know what? I wouldn't have had it any other way. I was so on board with it. It was so tense. There was a lot of moments where I thought she's going to die. Like when her suit starts cracking, and I'm like, they're going to end this movie with her having to basically sacrifice herself. She's going to leave Andy on that ship. And that's going to be the end of it. Like it's that's what it is. But she does end up besting it and sending it off into space, and we do get our happy little ending there with Andy and Rain. And I gotta say, although it was a big swing, and like I said, I wasn't crazy about the face at first, I think that it's the perfect way to again establish that we're not leaving the lore behind. We are bringing everything full circle. And if this is my one shot to play with my own creation with this black goo, I'm doing it. And I respect the hell out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like looking at the idea of this kind of looking like an engineer, it's like you got to kind of remember that the black goo, the creation of life came from the engineers. This is actually coming from a human being, birthing from a human being. So for me, I reconciled with it really quick. Didn't really have any issues with it. And just, this bastard being of, oh my gosh, what are we dealing with here? I absolutely loved it. And I wasn't sure where it was going to go. I didn't know if Rain was going to make it out of there either. There were some moments in there where, Fede Alvarez really had me because up until this point, everything was on the table. So I didn't really know what this thing was going to look like. You said, gets blasted out into space, like how we do see with a lot of the other Alien franchise films. And I think looking at that is a perfect example of why Fede Alvarez is such a great filmmaker, where he understands what you need in an Alien franchise film. So you take those familiar beats, you pay tribute to the lore, the established lore where you expand upon it and start something fresh. So you're really pleasing the audience, the established audience, and maybe some newcomers, where it's like, yes, we're going to take you down a different avenue, but you're going to see some familiar scenery. So, I think that's why this film hits with me so much, is that it does play so close to a lot of the really great Alien films. The first two that a lot of people talk about that are going to go down in history, some of the best filmmaking that's out there. But then also opens up new chapters, and you see that Fede Alvarez stamp on it. You see the Evil Dead stamp. You see the Don't Breathe stamp, So for me, this film worked on so many different levels. It gets me eager for the first time in a long time for the Alien franchise to say, what's next? What other lore are we going to establish? Would I love for him to get a sequel of this? Absolutely. But I think he opens the door wide enough for if someone comes in here that, you know, is a trusted filmmaker that has a love for the lore, they can really do anything they want because he established so much, he expanded upon so much. Alien Romulus, for me, you know, walking out of the theater on Monday, as we see these films, I have kept a list of my top films, and I have probably about top 20 films that I've seen throughout the year thus far, and it's always changing. And I walked out of the theater, and I sat in my car, and I put Alien Romulus at the top of that list. And I gotta say, as we sit here and record this spoiler, it's still at the top of the list.
So it's your favorite film of 2024 so far?
It's my favorite of the year, and it still sits there. So I know,
brother.
you know, I never expect a franchise film that, you know, has that established, especially when we're playing with aliens, when those are in the conversation, for this to be my number one of the year. But as we sit here right now, mid-August, this is my top film of the year.
I gotta say, folks, I've known Luke for a long time, and this man is a pretentious little bitch, and he would never say this. So this is a big moment. I'm just kidding. No, this is great. This is honestly, I'm so happy to hear that because yeah, it's like for hear you to say something like that about one of these, like you didn't even say that, give that much praise to like Prey, and we loved Prey. Like Prey is amazing. It's the best Predator film we've had in decades. But like it's just, this is just a whole nother level. I think like this is just, and it maybe it's that cinematic experience, you know. I think like this is just one of those movies that will absolutely be best of the year for me, top 3 maybe. I can't say that this is my favorite of the year. I still think Late Night with the Devil might be my favorite. I don't know. I really got to go back and re-rack my list. I've been keeping a list of all the films we've seen this year, so I got to go back and take a look because there's been a lot of good shit in 2024, but this for certain, as far as theatrical experiences go, this is probably my top theatrical experience. Like I said, seeing this in IMAX, I mean, just the being a massive fan of this franchise, getting to see it a little bit early, having the privilege to go to a critic screening is all because of you guys. So we thank you for that, because if you guys didn't watch this, people wouldn't invite us to shit like this. So, you know, thank you so much for making dreams come true for us. But this is definitely one of those movies that on all levels I walked out satisfied. I mean, I'd have to really be reaching to really sit there and want to break up and complain about, you know, the CGI on Rook and, you know, just kind of the name drops and the line drops of certain things. You know, it's like these are all just surface level things. Like at the end of the day, this movie did what I want all franchise horror films and franchise films in general to do, and that is push our story forward. Give us more room. Do exactly what Luke said there, where you walk out of this movie and you're just like, I'm actually excited to see where this goes next. I'm deeply excited to see what is the next chapter in the story. And that's what Alien Romulus does. Whew. What a video. What a fucking video, man. Thank you guys. If you made it this far, you are seriously the real MVPs. So go ahead and drop a comment down below letting us know what your favorite moment from Alien Romulus was, so we know you made it to the hour 12 mark in this video. And yeah, I mean, any final thoughts, Luke? Are you pretty much, I think we got this baby wrapped up.
I think so. I mean, other than retreading everything that I've said on how great this film is, you know, it does have its minor problems, but, you know, for this one to come out swinging like it did, to really hold up in terms of a franchise that's been spanned over decades, and for this probably be, what, maybe third in line, fourth in line, depending on where this falls for people, in terms of probably where this is going to stand in quality of the franchise. What a big merit that is. So, you know, for me, stands at the top of my list right now. Usually these bigger films like that, they don't. But we'll see where the end of the year lies. But this one is definitely going to be in my top 5 at the very least, probably top 3.
Absolutely. And I can tell you it'll definitely be top 5. Like you said, if not top 3. I mean, it's one of those ones where I'm just sitting here pining to go see this again on Sunday with my dad. Like, I'm so excited.
I can't wait for a Blu-ray release on this.
I know. 4K. It's going to be beautiful, dude. And like, you know, that's the thing. Like, I'm sitting here thinking about it. Like, I was excited to hear our friends like start messaging us and letting us know, like, oh, I saw the movie. Like, you know, Evan and Alex and Jake and everybody started texting right about 5-6 o'clock. They were like, oh my God, I saw it. And like, you know, not to, this video will be out after their videos are out. So I can say that all reviews have been positive, like nothing but glowing reviews from everybody, which, you know, for our little group, our little foursome there of people we interact with frequently, you know, we don't all agree on the film. Very
Hardly
rarely
ever.
I think maybe the only one might have been In a Violent Nature so far. I think every other movie that we've ever talked about, somebody has been an odd man out. And this is like one of those few films where it's just, not only is everybody on the same page, but it's glowing. Like everybody is like, I loved it. And let's be real, there's a few people in there. Well, there's one person who hasn't seen anything but the first film. I bet you guys can't guess who that is. What a weird experience that is. I almost want to interview Evan on this channel because, like, could you imagine that? Like seeing Alien
Man,
and then just
quite a
going
shock.
right into Romulus.
He's like, let's do it. I love it.
I loved his reaction too, because he's just like, this is fucking insane. He's like, this movie fucks so hard. I'm like, brother, there are so many elements to this that are callbacks and things that they've like established, but they've never gone too far for. Like, he doesn't know what the black goo is. He doesn't know anything. It's like, fuck, dude, like going in raw like that, that's tough. Like, what a way, what a trooper. But yeah, man, it's an exciting time to be an Alien fan. It's always an exciting time to be a horror fan when you're on Splattercast. So yeah, I think that's it. I think that's where we're gonna end it, guys. So thank you again for watching. We appreciate you all so much. And yes, we do have a little bit more Alien content coming your way after this video is posted. And yeah, that's all I gotta say. So I guess until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the horror shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna smash your ass.